So let's talk about this life after corporate journey. And I know we were chatting before we hit record
Mm.
that you had a short stint in corporate, but would love to have our listeners learn more about why you chose the path that you're on. What was that moment when you realized that corporate life is not for me and you chose another path instead?
Mhm. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that corporate life is not for me. I've just
Okay.
decided to be in corporate life on my own terms. Um, yeah.
Okay.
So, after graduation in undergrad, so I have a BSc, which is a research-based undergrad in psychology. And, I landed, and this was in, like, the mid-90s, so that was when we had that recession where kids were graduating and no jobs and all of that, so I did a lot of,
Right.
temporary work, and I was, like, in and out of all kinds of organizations doing all kinds of interesting things and learned a lot about corporate, small business, because I was that receptionist up at front who, filled in for somebody who didn't show up or was sick or on vacation or something. And in between phone calls and long stretches of silence, I would be reading corporate, reports and annual reports. And this was before internet, so I couldn't do any searches, but I grabbed whatever was kind of, there. So I was reading all kinds of
Mhm.
corporate materials and things like that. So and I'm also a people watcher, so I watched a lot of these things kind of happening in terms of relationships, in organizations, how people functioned, how leaders, got people invested in doing the things that needed to be done, and eventually I landed in a full-time role in a, consulting position. So I was in a consulting position. They actually got acquired by Deloitte& and Touche, many
Wow.
years ago, and, they focused on soft skills training. So at that time in the '90s, soft skills training was kind of seen as the stepchild of corporate training. It was considered a soft skill and, so spent a year there, and that's where my love for organizations and leadership and people, relationships, and psychology kind of collided. So, yeah, so my leader after a year, she was lovely. My first day with her was somebody dropped Kleenex on my desk and said, "Good luck." And I thought, "Oh, great. What am I in for?" And then the last day, she was pretty much, "You're too smart for what it is that you're doing. Either you let me mentor you into something much bigger, or you go into the world and do what it is that you're supposed to be doing because you're in the wrong place." So I went back to
Wow.
grad school, became a therapist, and even though I became a therapist, I've always had my fingers in the corporate world. So my clientele were always professionals. I did a stint on site at Johnson and Johnson as an EAP consultant. So I did far more than what EAP usually is. I ended up being the go-to person for leadership training, soft skills. I was doing like at least 2 or 3 trainings a year for senior leadership. And I was also called to the table for senior leadership change management meetings, with the instruction to, can you please keep your ears open, Manila, for anything that we're not thinking of in terms of from a people perspective and taking care of our people during change management situations. So, and now I've kind of made that shift from being a therapist to
Mm.
going full on into coaching leaders, entrepreneurs, founders, specifically around how their brain functions. And because I have this varied experience, I can kind of pull on all kinds of things. And I think one of the best compliments that anybody has ever given me is you think about things from all kinds of different perspectives. So spiritual, emotional, business perspective, from a cognitive perspective, whatever's happening with you physically. So I kind of take all of those things together and work with people in that way.